poor financing of feeding grants for special schools and the Ghana School Feeding Program. Point 12. Feeding grants for special schools are in arrears for almost 2 years, creating a severe challenge for managers of special schools. Similarly, the Ghana School Feeding Program is also in arrears of a year, forcing many caterers to boycott cooking for pupils. Beyond the delayed disbursement and arrears, the recently proposed increase in budgetary allocation to the Ghana School Feeding Program from 0.97 pesos to 1 cedi 20 pesos is unrealistic and cannot provide lunch for pupils at a time senior high school who receives a budget of 3 cedis per pupil for lunch are even complaining about inadequate feeding budgets. This is greater concern about the medium-term expenditure projections of the Ministry of Finance and to cut the Ghana School Feeding budget by 25% in 2025. This is equally unacceptable, as many poor children may drop out of school. Shifting cost of basic education to parents. Point 13. The poor disbursement of the capitation grant has compelled many schools to shift the cost of running basic schools to parents. Though unsustainable, some of these unintended costs include the cost of conducting examinations, utilities, among others. In some schools, parents are even required to pay for school desk or bring same as a condition for admitting their wards. This is because there are no funds to maintain broken desks or produce new ones. While teachers are mindful of the ban on fees, in the absence of the funds for running schools, without parental contribution, education service delivery at the basic level will pose a grave challenge. Non-payment of utility bills in basic schools. Point 14. Public basic schools pay for utilities at commercial rates, which are very expensive. And since the capitation grant does not cover utility bills, schools are almost always in arrears and often fail to provide utility service. Many schools do not have money to buy prepaid electricity or have been connected for non-payment of electricity bills and are therefore unable to participate in government's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics agenda, as electricity is needed to power the devices and accompanying programs. In the absence of government funding, some schools are compelled to levy pupils against the F-cube policy. Lack of incentive for rural teachers affecting teacher deployments. Point 15. Almost 2 decades after the 2006 Education Reform Committee recommended allowances for teachers who accept postings to rural and deprived parts of Ghana, no action has been taken. Ghana is one of the few countries where the salaries of urban teachers is the same as those teaching in deprived communities. The lack of political will by successive governments to incentivize teaching in rural and deprived communities has resulted in the shortage of teachers in such areas. While government has long initiated some discussions on this matter, the delay in taking concrete action is an issue of urgent concern. Politicized recruitment of teachers. Point 16. We are gravely disturbed about the recent public distribution of teachers' appointment letters by some members of parliament, a week before the Ghana Education Service released letters of appointment to teacher applicants. The public claim by the MPs about the role they played in securing appointment letters for teachers who are political party agents suggest that political factors other than the demand for teachers may have influenced to a higher extent the 2023 limited teacher recruitment. This Politicized deployment of teachers has negative implications for teachers' management and equitable distribution of teachers, especially in districts where MPs are not from the ruling government. Medium-term expenditure framework under IMF, point 17. As Ghana enters another International Monetary Fund program for the medium term 2023 to 2025, the Ministry of Finance, apart from allocating only 12% out of the budget to education, projects to allocate 11% in 2024 and 2025, while cutting the Ghana school feeding program budget by 25% in 2025. The medium-term 2023-2025 expenditure estimates contained in the 2023 budget are obnoxious to education and require immediate revision to reflect the minimum funding norms of 15% budgetary allocation to education. It is also necessary to rather increase the school feeding budget in line with inflationary trends and maintain, if not increase, the number of beneficiaries from the current 3.4 million. No consultation on new secondary education strategy, point 18. Teachers and civil society organizations are major players in executing the government's education agenda. There is a general lack of consultation by the Minister of Education on major education policy and reform issues. Last year, for instance, the Minister of Education announced a new strategy to increase secondary education to 6 years. It is sad to know that as important as teachers and civil society organizations are in the nation's education development, we have not been consulted on the said strategy. All efforts to get the Ministry of Education to present the strategy to us for discussion and inputs have so far proven futile. The continuous unilateral decision making the Minister of Education has a strong potential to affect the quality of education policy formulation, implementation, and sustainability. So our recommendations. A, the government must increase the budgetary allocation to education from the current 12% to at least 15% of the total national budget, using the supplementary budget window, and prioritize the disbursement of allocated discretionary education budget to increase the low budget execution to at least 100% by the end of the current financial year. The anticipated budgetary increment in the above, which amounts to over 4.3 billion, should be, as a matter of urgency and necessity, be allocated to augment the hugely underfunded basic education goods and services budget and construct about 5,000 schools existing under trees, sheds, and dilapidated structures. C, the government must develop an emergency infrastructure expansion plan for overcrowded urban and peri-urban schools. The plan must also include a purposive approach to bridging the 25% gap between primary and JHS while providing new schools for underserved communities. The government must also deploy desks to all the 2.3 million pupils in underserved schools. Partnerships with the Forestry Commission and the private sector should be pursued. E, roll out a funded plan to furnish all basic schools with ICT laboratories. The government must immediately procure textbooks and workbooks in all relevant subjects for all basic schools. That's point F. J, the government must reintroduce the supply of free exercise books to all public schools in the country. The government must diversify the financing source for the capitation grant to include annual budget funding amount, which is more reliable, while benchmarking its annual increment with annual inflation data. Point I. The government must disburse approved funds for financing arrears and the current cost of feeding in special schools and under the Ghana School Feeding Program. Additional allocations must be made in 2023 supplementary budget to augment the inadequacies. The government must depoliticize the recruitment of teachers by removing MPs from the recruitment process. And then, point K, the government must implement the long advocated and recommended 20% allowance for teachers in deprived areas. L, the government must put the secondary education strategy on hold until consultations with the teachers and civil society organizations have been held to inform its review. And finally, the government must release all arrears on the capitation grant to end the imposition of various forms of fees on pupils. The grants must be increased to absorb the cost of utilities with automatic annual adjustments instituted in line with inflationary trends. Thank you very much.